everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome to the 5 Yard Dynasty podcast. I am your host, as usual, Liam, or at the FSA Tweets on Twitter. And as usual, I'm joined by Rich, my co-host, at Dynasty Island on Twitter. Rich, how have you been doing this week, friend?
I am very good, mate. I'm very good. I've got one person left to put in the UK FFC live draft leagues. So, that's been a slightly stressful week. It felt like herding cats at some points. But yeah, we're almost there. So what I think 10 days, 11 days away. So it's getting very real, very fast.
Yeah, as of recording Saturday next week. So it's going to be interesting. We've got, what was it, Rich, 80 attendees? So
I think it's 82.
82. So going to be a great Saturday afternoon for everyone joining. But enough about the UK FFC. We'll dive straight into the guest that we've got this week, one of the 5 Yard Dynasty writers. He's also written for basically every other department in 5 Yard Rush at the moment, just because you can't slow him down. I mean, he also writes for B-Roto Fantasy, The Touchdown, and King Fantasy Sports. So let's bring him in. Luke, how are you doing, buddy?
Not bad, mate. Not bad yourself? Keeping well?
Not bad, yeah. All good.
Good.
You got into the Scott Fish Bowl, didn't you?
I did,
was
mate,
it yesterday?
Today, I'm still on a bit of a high on that one, mate. Yeah, absolutely. I've given up all hope. I thought that would be done for this year, but scraped my way in. So I think Paul Picking had a bit of magic that he worked on that one for me. So shout out to Paul on helping me out, and also in the Water Bowl as well, all in the space of a week. So yeah, quite happy. Now it's got a winner.
Congratulations, yeah. Well, good luck with that. Was it 2,000 people, something in Scott Fish Bowl? So, yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. I mean, July is going to be an interesting month. I mean, me and Rich, we've been gearing up for the UK FFC for 4 months, roughly, Rich. And then we've also got Scott Fish Bowl, Warrior Bowl, JTT Cup, FFCC, EFFC, if you're in that, Rich.
I'll be in it again.
5 or 6 different. Yeah, we've got 5 or 6 different tournaments going. So if you're drafting in July, it's going to be a busy time. Comments coming through. We've got Paul and Nath from 5 Yard Rush / 5 Yard Dynasty and IDP. So hello, both of you. Anyway, enough chit chat about charity tournaments. Let's dive into today's segment. So that is players who will bust at their current ADP. Now, when we say bust, I'm sure that Rich is going to dive in and correct me, because I normally have a different idea of what bust means compared to what Rich means. The way that I see it is someone that's not going to live up to the performance of where they're currently being drafted by ADP and won't be drafted as highly next year, because that's how Dynasty works. Unfortunately, you don't just go off last year's performance, because could still be young. I mean, Rich, do you want to jump in there?
No, I mean it's nice that we're on the same page. You know, we have these texts all throughout the off season planning these shows, and finally we're on the same page.
It's only taken us how long?
Exactly. It's basically, for me, it's someone that is going to be worth less in a year than they are now, and won't pay back their current prices, is essentially the aim of today's show. We thought we'd be a little bit negative.
Aren't we always, though? That's the issue. Anyway, let's try and bring the mood up a bit, and let's dive straight in. So, Luke, what we've done is we've split it up between running back, wide receiver, and then quarterback and tight end together at the end. So let's start off at the running back position. You have the lowest ADP bust out of all three of us, but who is that going to be this week?
is Lenny Fournette. It took me a while to get there, to be honest, because there are a few others, but yeah, Lenny just about kind of edged it for me. I was sort of toying with the idea of Zeke, but I think after last year, when you look at a lot of people forget how well Zeke did last year. So, and this is him playing with a pectoral injury for parts of that year as well. So, I think he comes back and does it again this year. So that's why Lenny just about edges it out for me. And the fact that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers drafted Rachaad White, that is a big worry for me and a big question mark over Lenny's productivity for this year.
So, are you not expecting the same touchdown production or the same volume? Where are you going with this? Because I see Leonard Fournette as probably staying a bit stagnant, maybe not busting, but having a good performance this year, but having all those question marks, the same ones that we went into this offseason with over in next offseason, because Gronk has retired, and I'm going to quotation marks that, retired, because we don't know whether he's actually going to come back during the season. For those of you that missed the news, he has said that he's open to coming back if he gets a call from Brady. And I can assume that's going to happen, but whether he actually comes back is to be seen. So with the touchdown safety, I suppose, of Gronk, I kind of see that as shifting over to Fournette getting that kind of safety work to try and get the touchdown from the red zone. Do you see that, or are you expecting those touchdowns to go elsewhere, or how do you see this playing out, Luke?
Yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? So you look at it, and obviously the fact they've not even got Godwin as well for potentially part of the season, they're probably going to be a run-first team for the early parts of the season. But as we know, Lenny's not ever had he's never played a full season. So at some point he's going to get injured. And Rachaad White, people have forgot he is that good that if he gets a sniff within that offense, I'm going to go out on a whim and say that job is his. He is that good. He can catch out the backfield better than pretty much anybody out of this draft class that's come by. And people forget, just because he's a good catcher, Rachaad is an awesome runner of the ball as well. And yeah, I'm not saying that Leonard Fournette's going to be awful this year, but the problem is if Rachaad White gets a sniff, he's going to take advantage. And he's openly said as well that he is after Lenny's job, which Lenny's come out and said that he loves that competitive attitude, somebody wanting his job. But when you've got a player that good on his toes, Lenny, I know he's been around for a long time, but he is coming 27, and that's a year when we see that's sort of the age when we see running backs kind of deteriorate a little bit more. And the fact he's not even had a full season before that does worry me a little bit. So, yeah, and the strength of season schedule for him as well is something of a worry for running backs. I think it's ranked 31st. So there's all these elements that kind of play in that, for me, I'm a big strength of season schedule guy because, yeah, that's ultimately what they're going to be going up against week in, week out. And if they're going to be a run-first team and they're going up against some of the best defenses against the run, then he might well not even get a chance to prove that worth as much as well.
So, Rich, I think I've got two questions here for you. One, how do you feel about strength of schedule before the season? Because personally, I don't put a whole lot of stock into it because we've seen defenses completely flip from one season to another, going from a heavy run-stopping team to a heavy pass-stopping team and vice versa. So I don't put a lot of stock into it. It does play on my mind, but it doesn't necessarily inform decisions for me. Obviously, Luke, that's the difference for you. And in the pre-draft process, I wasn't very high on Rachaad White, sorry. So as Rich loved to point out during the pre-draft process, that I was extremely low on Rachaad White. And that draft capital of a third-round pick does make sense that he's coming for that job, but I just don't know whether it's going to get him there. And if he does get those touches, I don't know whether he gets the full job this season. Maybe next season, but not this season. But anyway, coming to you, Rich, one, strength of schedule, how do you see it? And two, Rachaad White, if he does get those touches and get a chance, do you think he can run away with Lenny's job?
Yes, I mean, for me, I love strength of schedule, but I basically don't take it into my process until week 8. So I think that the turnover year to year in terms of defense, we see it every year, is huge. But yeah, I don't, in terms of my week to week ranks, it counts for about 30% of my ranking after week 8. But weeks 1 to 7, I don't take into approach, and I certainly am not taking it into my thought process when I'm sort of ranking Dynasty guys. I think for me, I like Leonard Fournette as a 1 year buy with kind of what I'd class as like a 1 year option. I think that we've seen historically with Brady that he basically doesn't trust rookies, and I just don't see a world in which I liked Rachaad White as a prospect. He's my rookie RB4. I think he's a good prospect down the line, but I just don't see a world in which he's taking work away from Fournette in a significant aspect. I think there is going to be some regression from Fournette, whilst yes, there are pieces coming out of this offense. He saw an obscene amount of targets last year. This is a guy that had 84 targets last year. Yes, a large part of that was because the Bucs threw over 700 times. And, if you look at a 13.7% target share, that's pretty what you'd expect potentially in heading into this year. But I expect the Bucs to maybe pass, like Luke was saying, become a little bit more run first. I think if Brady's thrown more than 600 times this year, I'd be shocked. So I like Leonard Fournette. I don't think he's going to be, what was he last year? Top 5 in terms of where he finished. He's currently I've got him redraft as an RB9. So that kind of gives you where I've got him. But he's my running back 20 in terms of Dynasty. So I think I quite like him as a slightly cheaper 1 year rental. That if you look at his contract, they can currently save $3 million if they cut him, but he's got an extra $2 million that becomes guaranteed on, I think, like the 3rd or 5th day of the league year. So that's, what's that, like March 18th, March 20th. So it'd be pre-draft. They'd have to pick that up. So basically, if he's on the team by the middle of March, he's playing again next year, sort of thing. So I think that, yeah, I could see him busting, but I think the difference between perhaps myself and Luke is that, as Luke said, he's big into Rachaad White, and I think that's probably a year away from being a thing for me for Rachaad White. I think that I just don't see Brady trusting a rookie as we've seen certainly in the past.
So, Rich, do you want to take us into your first player, your first running back?
Yeah, of course. So maybe if you want to get back into one of my traditional phrases and one of my traditional tropes, so it's a volume-based RB2. I think we can all be devastated. I think the whole fantasy community had some high hopes, but Antonio Gibson, he's fallen into that category now. So he's currently RB18 in ADP. I've actually got him as my RB25 in Dynasty. The Commanders, almost said the Commanders, paid a lot of money to bring back J.D. McKissick. We've talked about Gibson, whether he's going to get that passing usage. That's clearly not happening. They went out and brought back McKissick after he signed with the Bills. They've drafted another running back in terms of Brian Robinson that I think profiles better as a short yardage back, and I think he'll probably be used in that red zone and goal to go area. So if we're taking a running back that's potentially not going to get a high volume of targets, isn't going to get any of those high value touches around the goal line, he is by definition a volume based RB2, and you guys know that that's just not somebody that I can be spending any money on at all. So yeah, I think that perhaps he's kind of outproduced his last 2 years basically because he's played a full season and has finished as a back-end RB1. But for me, I think at his current price of RB18, there's plenty of other guys that I would rather over the next year or two than Antonio Gibson.
So it's been way too long since you've spoken about your volume-based running backs. But what do you class as a volume-based running back? Because are you looking purely at efficiency there, or I'm trying to gain?
Yeah, sorry, I appreciate it's been a while since I've offered up my definition, isn't it? So basically, my volume-based RB2s are guys that are being drafted or valued as an RB2 purely based on volume that they will receive rather than necessarily talent or the role they were playing. So, for example, Antonio Gibson, whilst very talented, the only reason I see him being as an RB2 in terms of how he is being priced, as we said, he's the RB18 in ADP, is purely based on the prospects that he will get volume. I don't believe that he is a supremely talented back. I don't believe that he is going to get the opportunity to score in high value situations. So therefore, he's a guy that I just don't want to roster.
So looking at his stats, he's not very efficient. I mean, he's had over 4 yards per carry, so that's good in both of his seasons. But a lot of his points are coming down to touchdowns. So he had 11 in his rookie season and then 10 in his sophomore season. So coming over to you, Luke, what do you think about Antonio Gibson? Because to me, if they brought in Brian Robinson and he does take in that role of the short down back, do you foresee that touchdown number going down? We know that touchdowns are sticky as a stat anyway, and you can't really predict them. But with Rich saying that he's a volume-based running back, if he's also not getting those touchdowns, where do you fall on Antonio Gibson if that would be the case?
Yeah, again, Gibson's a player, I'll be honest, in pretty much every league. I don't think I've got one share of him whatsoever. I'm just not interested. He's one of those guys that out of college you were seen as this multi-purpose running back. However, the fact he's landed on a team where they've got JD McKissick who can catch out the backfield, that eats into his fantasy value straight away. But it's one of those things. I'm one of those guys. I like the fact that I like the volume rushing backs, in the fact that I try and stay away from any running backs that are involved in a tandem, purely because straight away it's taken away from the value, and that is how I see McKissick at the moment. Gibson at the moment with McKissick around, and the fact they've drafted in Robinson as well. When McKissick goes, it's probably going to be the same old story again. So, yeah, I've stayed well clear from even any deals which are getting sent to me offering me Gibson. I'm just not interested whatsoever at the moment. It's just, yeah. And not only that, I'm one of those guys, I kind of judge on teams as well. So previous years, I've avoided New York Jets players. At the moment, I'm in that phase where I'm not wanting any piece of that Washington offense whatsoever in any of my fantasy teams. Not even Terry McLaurin, these kind of guys, just not interested.
Yeah, we're not interested in Terry McLaurin either, are we, Rich? we have strong opinions there.
Give me all the John Dotson though. I'll happily scoop up that.
It is current value in rookie drafts, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, of course.
But Antonio Gibson is someone that I was on pre-draft, and then when Brian Robinson, who again I was pretty high on Robinson compared to consensus from what I saw anyway. That was kind of two of my worlds colliding and creating some sort of like apocalypse. It was awful. I hated it. I think both of them are talented, and both of them, if they get the backfield to themselves, can do great things. But that's not going to happen. They're both on rookie contracts. Gibson's there for another 2 years, and then Robinson's there for obviously another 4. So, it's a tough situation. So, moving on to my running back, I've got Cam Akers, and I started out on Cam Akers as liking him going into the pre-draft phase 2 years ago, and then kind of waned on him when he started to get a bit more hype around, but his O-line was the worst and he still did really well, and all of this from his college scene. And I liked his draft spot, and then he got injured, and that was a big issue. We obviously know from past experience Achilles are not something to be taken lightly. We've seen Marlon Mack and Donta Foreman, their careers just fall apart, and Cam Akers was kind of riding off his own coattail from his short sample size back. I believe it was in his rookie season where he had a short sample size then, and everyone was drafting him really highly, and then he got injured. Now, people don't draft and expect an injury to the player that they're drafting, so that's not anything to go off apart from talking about his injury. But I feel that he's doing the exact same thing this year. He's kind of still riding off that rookie season hype. And then he also did really well in the playoffs, from what I remember, as in efficiency. I don't think he was game-changing in terms of the actual game, but I believe he did pretty well. And Rich is shaking his head, so no.
No, he got decent volume in the playoffs, but he was up against some very tough run defenses, so he basically did nothing. I think that's it, isn't it? Is that the concern is, he came back in 6 months from an Achilles tear, which was absolutely insane, but looked pretty average when he came back. So it's a case of, do we view that recovery as a good thing? Do we view it as a bad thing that he looked rubbish when he came back? I kind of feel like if he hadn't have come back last year, his value might be even higher, to be honest.
Which to me is crazy. I mean, we've seen Achilles tears go down and just destroy someone's career and dynasty value, and yet his somehow has stayed the same, if not increased. But so, listeners, the ADP for Cam Akers in June DLF ADP is RB13, and to me that is just way too high. I mean, I'm going to sound a bit of a hypocrite here, but I'm taking J.K. Dobbins over him. I mean, one slightly different injury, but both season-ending injuries. But I'm going back to Dobbins in a better running offense and having a much better rookie season than Akers did. I mean, if we go back to the rookie season of Cam Akers, he couldn't beat out Darrell Henderson until the latter part of the season, and Malcolm Brown was there, still getting significant touches. So to me, Cam Akers at RB13, when we really haven't seen anything over the past 2 years, is a little bit high. Well, I say a little bit, really high for me. I think I've got him a good 5 spots lower than that. But coming over to you, Luke, first.
Yeah.
How are you drafting Cam Akers at the moment? Is RB13 about right for you? Are you looking at that rookie season and that small sample size and gushing over it, or are you just out completely?
At the moment, I'm out. Like Rich said, he come back and admittedly against good run defenses, but he just, to me, like I say, he got the productivity, but he did absolutely nothing with it, which worried me. So obviously, like Rich said as well, just saying, if he didn't come back from that injury, it'd probably be even higher than the 13th that's there now. But yeah, I'm really, really not keen on that at all. And again, going back to strength of season schedules, the Rams overall have got a pretty tough season ahead, which would worry me a little bit. So, yeah, it's one of the I'm just not keen at all. I've got him outside my top 20 at the moment. But then I'm a win now guy, so I'm not always looking for the younger guys. So naturally, a few of those guys fall a little bit for me. But yeah, no, I'm just not invested whatsoever. It's one of those where in that playoff last year, if anything, in the playoff run, that put me off him more than anything. It really did. I just kind of watched him and I thought, is this guy really that much better than what Henderson were providing before? Probably on a par. And it's one of those where you don't know whether this season he ends up losing the job to Henderson at times, and that injury comes back to haunt him as well. So there's too many question marks there for my liking, and I'm just not wanting a piece of that. It's just worth more hassle than it's worth for me.
So, Rich, do you have anything to add, considering you kind of already spoke about his lack of efficiency last year in the playoffs?
No, not really. I mean, he's kind of in that range. I just don't like running backs, to be honest. I'd rather either spend up for an elite guy or wait and take 10 guys late. I don't like the value where he's at. I think, it's high risk, high reward, isn't it? We could be sitting here in a year, and I don't think I'd be shocked if he was a, top 3 dynasty running back in terms of his value. If he does put it all together and the way that offense can work and move the ball, he could be incredible. But I wouldn't be shocked if we were sat here in a year's time saying, Cam Akers is probably not in the top 40 running backs and could be on his way out of the league, kind of thing. So, yeah, I just don't really want him. Don't know what to do with him. So he just sort of sits in there at a point that I don't touch him.
So, Luke, coming back to you, let's move on to the wide receiver position. Who have you got for us at wide receiver?
I have got DK Metcalf. I think with me, it's more personal more than anything. Last year, he hurt me so much in so many leagues that I just got so put off by him. It's one of those where he was so up and down. One week he'd score you 20 points, the next week he'd score you a point. And I'd rather get somebody who's a little bit more stable. If you look at the ADPs out there, he's going above the likes of like Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill. I'd rather have them two any day over DK Metcalf right now. And the thing is with DK Metcalf, he's that sort of player that he could end up being a top wide receiver this year. But then on the flip side, he could end up being a wide receiver 3. It's that quarterback side of things that really, really worries me, though. Obviously, to me, and logically, I'm thinking if he couldn't do it last year with Russell Wilson and over the last couple of years, and he's now having to contend with what looks like it's going to be Geno Smith as his main sort of guy, that worries me a lot. The only benefit to that is the fact that, again, going back to when I said there's teams that I'm not keen on, Seattle are one of those teams this year where I'm not wanting any piece of that offense. And I suppose from a wide receiver point of view, they're going to be chasing a lot of games, so they're going to have to throw the ball a lot more. But yeah, I'm just really, really not there on DK Metcalf. I see him going so high in drafts, and I just do not understand how he's going above some like Stephon Diggs. Just no way he's a better option than Stephon Diggs or Tyreek Hill, despite the age.
So when you say you can't see him doing it, what do you mean? Because he's been the PPR 14, wide receiver 14 last year, and PPR wide receiver 7 in his second season.
Yeah.
What do you mean by you don't see him doing it? As in this year, you don't see him at all achieving that, whether he's got Geno or Drew Lock, whatever that situation is, or whether they do trade for Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? If they trade for Baker Mayfield, it looks like that's been quashed this week in terms of that happening. But if they did, it might increase his value a little bit more. But for a guy who's going inside the top 10, and like I say, he's year in, year out, PPR wide receiver 14, where is that? I want a guy who's, if I'm drafting him as a top 10 wide receiver, I want a top 10 wide receiver. I don't want somebody who's going to be 14, and that's with Russell Wilson as well. If he's now got Geno Smith or Drew Lock throwing in the ball, there is not a chance in hell that he is even a wide receiver 25, the top wide receiver 25. I just do not see it. There's so many better options. The wide receiver class this year is so stacked that there's just so many better options out there and not potentially in terms of, for me, I'm a running back kind of guy when I draft. So for me, I'm quite happy to wait for the wide receivers with a bit more value. So you've got the likes of Hollywood Brown, Rashad Bateman, Michael Pittman potentially. These are all better value to me where they're sat than somebody like DK Metcalf, who could potentially or probably will be worse in terms of overall fantasy point scoring for me.
So, Rich, where do you fall down on this? Because I'm not talking for the entire Dynasty community when I say this, but when I'm drafting DK Metcalf, he's kind of not a win now play. I mean, he's had 3 really good seasons. Wide receiver 34 in his first season, which for a rookie nearly eclipsing 200 points is pretty good. And then I've obviously already mentioned the previous 2 seasons, but when I pick DK Metcalf, I'm kind of looking to the future because I'm seeing this year as a wash. I mean, if he gets Baker Mayfield, it's probably going to be Baker Mayfield for the next few years. Yeah. But if he doesn't, then I'm expecting the Seahawks to take a young quarterback in the 2023 draft. Is that where you're sat with DK Metcalf, or are you shying away from him at his current ADP of wide receiver 9?
I think his current ADP is rich. He's my wide receiver 16.
Was that pun intended?
Well, if you want to take it that way, why not? I think let's be honest, DK Metcalf is a quarterback away from being a good value at wide receiver 9. Yeah. I think that the talent is there, the production is there. It's literally a quarterback question. Now, what if I was to say to you, he averages small sample size, but he averages more fantasy points per game without Russell Wilson.
Oh dear! I knew you were going to say this, but what's the sample size, Rich? Because we've just mentioned Cam Akers and small sample sizes. I can't come along and say, "Oh yeah, but DK's fine."
So he played 46 games with Russell Wilson and averaged 14.3 PPR points a game. He played 3 games without Russell Wilson and averages 17.2 points per game. So, as I said, it's minuscule sample size. All I'm saying is, I think that if Baker signed tomorrow in Seattle, then I think that DK Metcalf is a good value at wide receiver 9. If they tank this year and they get one of what could potentially be 4 or 5 decent quarterback prospects next year, I think he's a good value play. I think, look, from a redraft perspective, he's not in my top 24 because at the moment, a mix of Geno Smith and Drew Lock, I just don't like it. But I think that if you're playing Dynasty looking, productive struggle, if you're looking to build over that 2, 3, 4 year window, then I think that you could get a guy at a slightly cheaper price now that, is very close to being, let's not forget, 12 months ago, he was going as the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. Like, we're very quick and very fickle to fall off these guys, but the talent's still there, and I really believe he's a quarterback away from being a bona fide wide receiver 1. Albeit for me at the moment, he's currently at wide receiver 16.
So, Rich, let's move on to your wide receiver for us.
Yeah, so again, this is a guy I've probably been slagging off all off season. Look, I love the player. I just can't get my head around the dynasty value at the moment. So that's Stephon Diggs. He's currently the wide receiver 10 in terms of ADP. He's 28 at the moment, and I think that, look, if you're looking at it as a 1 year thing, then yeah, he's probably going to return that wide receiver 10 price. But you can almost guarantee that this time next year his price is dropping. I think even if he put up a wide receiver 1 overall wide receiver 1 season, which I don't think he will, but even if he did that, I don't think he's a top 10 wide receiver this time next year, because I think the dynasty community is so age fickle that an age 29 receiver, there's no way they're paying top 10 prices for him, even if they're at that point. We see Cooper Kupp is wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6, coming off arguably the greatest wide receiver season ever. And I just don't think Stephon Diggs has got that. So for me, what we're saying is he's currently a wide receiver 10. Even if he had a complete outlier season, he's not going to return that value. So this is an easy guy that I think is going to bust his current ADP. I think there's, you saw the 2020 season where he approached a 30% target share and had, finished overall wide receiver 3. Last year, he was around that traditional kind of wide receiver 1 mark of 25% target share, and he put up a, not a bad season, was still a wide receiver 1, but not truly elite. And I think that 25% target share is where he's probably going to be this year. Where everybody's predicting Gabriel Davis taking a step forward. We've seen them go out and get James Cook. I think people are forgetting that Jameson Crowder has been brought in, and I think that he's basically a like-for-like replacement for Cole Beasley. And I don't think Stephon Diggs is going to see an increase in target share. Yes, he might see an increase in efficiency. He had a low touchdown year last year. But I think that a wide receiver 10 in ADP, that's just too rich for me. You're basically buying a guy that you can almost guarantee is going to drop in value in the next 12 months.
See, while I agree with the player and some of the reasoning, I did want to point out that Davante Adams is currently 29 years old and has just come off a good season. I will say Adams is a better player than Diggs and has had a better career than Diggs. However, he's a 29-year-old, just switched teams, and he's currently going within the top 10. So I can see it happening for Diggs being in the top 10 next season, especially if he has a wide receiver 1 season. But I understand your points with him busting at ADP. Go on.
Devontae Adams was the wide receiver 1 last year. Okay, in terms of Dynasty ADP. No, wide receiver 1 in ADP.
Oh, as in ADP. Okay, yeah.
He finished the season as the wide receiver 2, and he's now the wide receiver 6. Okay, Stephon Diggs is the wide receiver 10. If he finishes as, the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, do you think he's going to go up in price? Because I certainly don't.
I don't think he's going up in price. I just don't think he's falling out of the top 12 wide receivers at the position.
Fair.
This feels like a bet brewing. But before we start betting stuff, Luke, how do you feel about Diggs?
I'm, again, a lot of guys know that I'm a win now kind of guy, so I always approach a draft like an aggressive redraft kind of thing. So for me, I'm very high on Diggs, but I do agree with Rich in the fact that the people that are there looking at the age and obviously further down the line, then yeah, I can see what Rich is saying. Even if he has a top year, when you look at Cooper Kupp, he's not really matched the value as to what he had last year. Again, Diggs, the fact he's going to be another year older and there is other options there, I kind of look at it and think he's probably is going to drop out the top 10. You'd like to think anyway, because it's not only that, you've got so many good sort of wide receivers that are of a young age that are probably going to have a good year, like Michael Pittman. You've got the likes of T. Higgins, these kind of guys who are probably going to propel on and end up getting into that top 10, which will see Diggs drop. But for me personally, if I'm drafting now, I'm taking Diggs, Adams, these kind of guys all day long. At their value, if I'm in a win now mode, I want these guys. But I can see what Rich is saying in the fact that, yeah, he's not going to withhold that value next year. Not a chance, I don't think.
So moving on to my wide receiver, I've got on the list Jerry Jeudy. So he's currently going as wide receiver 25. To me, he kind of already has that Russell Wilson bump without actually seeing his production. He's never finished above wide receiver 40. He has had an injury plagued last year, but the year before he did play for the full season. But to me, I just don't see where people are seeing the value bump from wide receiver 25. Now, I agree that he has the top 24 wide receiver kind of upside, but when I'm ranking people, I'm putting so many people above him for next year. And he's 23 years old. He's going into his third season. Cortland Sutton's still there. They've just signed Tim Patrick to a new deal. I mean, it's obvious that they don't think Jerry Jeudy is the number one in that offense, else they wouldn't be doing these sort of moves. Now, they've gone out and got Russell Wilson, and we've seen Russell Wilson produce 2 really good wide receivers for fantasy in a lot of his seasons, if not all of them. But I just don't see the full value bump, because at the price that you're having to pay for him right now, I really don't see how you're going to increase in value too much going into next year. To me, Jerry Jeudy needs kind of an injury or Sutton to be really, really slow, which I'm not predicting. I'd much rather have Sutton at his lower ADP, because I think that Sutton can be that number one that Jeudy can't be from current predictions. Now, he did have over 100 targets in that first season. He just wasn't very efficient with catching them. But I think that kind of comes down to the quarterback play. So without rambling on too much, I think people are trying to predict the Wilson bump, which is fair enough, but I think he's getting bumped way too high currently. Luke, where do you fall on Jerry Jeudy? Because he seems to be a player that you love, or a player that you're just never picking up in any drafts if you talk to anyone.
Yeah, I've got to admit, you've pretty much said everything there. It's one of those where Russell Wilson landing there has instantly seen his stock stratosphere, to be honest, because years before he's not done anything really to warrant where he's been drafted now. And to me, the rumours and the bits that you're hearing coming out of camp is that Russell Wilson's building quite a nice connection with Cortland Sutton already, which says to me, if I'm going to be drafting one of these two guys now, I want to go for somebody with a lower ADP who's potentially and pick up somebody else at where Jerry Jeudy's going and still get a piece of that Denver offense a little bit further down the line with what seems like is a player that's building a better relationship with Russell Wilson already. But I think one of the things that a lot of people like with Jerry Jeudy is the fact that he's got that potential to play all these sort of gadget plays that people like. So a lot of people out there, you hear them saying, oh, he could end up playing like a bit of a Deebo Samuel role. I personally don't see that, so I'm not banking on that whatsoever. And yeah, it's just one of those. I'm just not seeing the value there compared to Courtland Sutton. And next year, you've got to remember, there's going to be so many good wide receivers coming out of the 2023 class that are probably going to jump above him anyway automatically in terms of ADP. And he's not going to live up to expectations this year, so he's naturally going to drop anyway as well. And if anything, Courtland Sutton will be the guy that I'll take him this time next year, I think.
I'm on the same agreement as you. Rich, where do you fall on this? I mean, Jeudy is, as I said, a polarizing character, so it seems like you're not going to be on the fence on this one.
Yeah, without wanting to, basically echo everything you said, I think, look, I love Jeudy coming out. I think the guy is an elite route runner. I think he can get open at will. I think the problem is that people are valuing him as if Aaron Rodgers was the starting quarterback, not Russell Wilson. I think that if you were putting in there a guy that was going to sit in the pocket, dissect the defense, make those short to intermediate throws, then yeah, I'd be all over Jerry Jeudy as the guy to own and the guy to hype. But I just don't see the fit with Russell Wilson. If Russell Wilson is going to be the Russell Wilson that he's been throughout his career, we know what he's going to do. He's going to hold the ball too long. He's going to escape the pocket. He's going to create windows for him to throw, and he's going to, target down the field. And to me, that benefits the prototypical X-type receiver, which is Courtland Sutton. And I think that whilst I think Jerry Jeudy's going to be a decent receiver, I wouldn't be shocked if he was like a wide receiver 3 this year. I just think perhaps people are hyping up the younger receiver without actually thinking about who the better fit and the better receiver is. And let's not forget, before the injury, Courtland Sutton was like a top 15 receiver in dynasty value. This is he was one of those guys that everybody was dreaming about building their dynasty teams around, being that future linchpin of your roster. He got one injury, had a bad year with some horrific quarterback play, and then everybody's forgetting about him. Yeah, Courtland Sutton's going 6 picks later in ADP. I'd rather Courtland Sutton straight up. So if I'm getting more value and I'm getting the better player, I'd take Sutton all day.
So, Luke, coming to you now. You've already said that you don't like the Seattle offense, and we're seeing the theme carry on here. So who have you got for us? And spoiler alert, it is a Seattle player.
And another spoiler alert, it's a tight end. So we're going with Noah Fant. So again, same old story. He's a guy that burnt me so much last year. There was the pre-draft hype about him, going to have a breakthrough year and blah, blah, blah. But just really, really never hit that. He didn't have a bad year. But when there were players who were going at a lower ADP last year outperforming him, that's when I kind of get put off by a player. And already on DLF, you're seeing his ADP dropping massive. I think it's at the lowest all time where he's ever been since he's hit the NFL, which says quite a lot to me. So, yeah. And again, it's going back to that thing again. He's playing with a worse quarterback no matter what. Even if they bring in Baker Mayfield, he's still got a worse quarterback than what he had last year. And that is something that does worry me. So it's kind of echoing what I said about DK Metcalf. It's just burnt in the past, worse quarterback. And yeah, there's not really it is just that side of things. And again, I think he's got the worst strength of season schedule as well for a tight end. And on top of that, he's never had a season where he's averaged 10 points per game, which really, really does worry me. When you think you've got somebody like Irv Smith there going at a lower ADP, I'm all in on somebody like that if I'm holding off. And Noah Fant's not going to be drafted as a tight end 1. He's going to be a tight end 2, maybe even a waiver wire guy in some leagues as well.
So just a couple of stats for you. Noah Fant only finished outside the top 12 tight ends in his rookie season, where he finished as tight end 17. In PPR, this is. He was tight end 12 last year and tight end 8 in 2020 when he had Drew Lock for 14 games, who is one of the two options in Seattle, but we still don't know who is going to be the starter there. I mean, with Fant, I liked him pre-draft process when he came out, but he's a tight end. I picked him up in one league, and he did pretty well for me there, but that was about it. But he's tight end, so I don't care about this range of tight ends. He's currently going as tight end 14, so if I have to pick one here, it's not going to be him. Rich, how do you feel about Noah Fant?
Yeah, it's one of those tight ends I just don't really care about, to be honest. I think it's a bit harsh, Luke. You saying he's not averaged 10 points per game. He's averaged 9.9 the last two seasons.
Stats are stats.
I think. Look, we can recycle everything I said about DK Metcalf. I think if Baker Mayfield's the quarterback in Seattle tomorrow, then I think that Noah Fant is probably a top 12, worth a top 12. Ranking. I think he's got the potential. I think, we've seen the elite draft capital. We've seen him command impressive target shares. The last 2 years he's been over 16% target share, and I'm a big believer in targets are earned.
Yeah.
He's been pretty low in terms of the touchdown side of things, and I think that I don't love Noah Fant. He's, as I said, he's in that tight end range that I don't like taking people. But at that point in the draft, I could paint a picture when Noah Fant's a top 5 tight end. I could paint a picture when Noah Fant's not a top 30 tight end. So I think it's just, at this point, you're basically taking coin flips on tight ends, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, Rich, let's stay on the tight end train. Who have you got as your tight end that you think is going to bust? And I'm pretty sure this is going to cause a bit of issue on the podcast. So, Rich, I'll let you take it away, and I'll just sit back and let Luke jump in afterwards.
I'll be honest. I only did this to give Luke an opportunity to talk about him, whilst I then tear him apart. So, Luke, did you want to go first? You can hype up Irv Smith, and then I'll tear him apart.
You can do that if you want, yeah, by all means. It's, for me, Irv Smith he's going to be a top 8 tight end this year, purely because he's got nobody to compete with in the tight end spot. I know in the receiver side you got Thielen and Jefferson, but again, like in mini camps and stuff like that, Kevin O'Connell is absolutely in love with Irv Smith at the moment, as are all Vikings fans and myself included. He's on a contract year, so he's going to have to obviously get the job done to probably, if anything, as brutal as it and as probably bold as this is, keep his NFL career on track. So if he doesn't do it this year, who's going to want to take a flyer on somebody who's been injured and flopped this year? So he's got a lot to prove. And again, he's proved we'll go back to the bite-sized samples. But he's proved when even Rudolph were there, we had Tyler Conklin there as well, that in that span, he was getting the job done and providing pretty elite numbers as well. I think he ranks something like 2nd and 3rd in yards per route run, these kind of things, which if he can do that on a bigger scale, then I am all in on this guy. And at the ADP he's going at, I don't see anybody else offering better value at the moment in this year's draft for me. Now you can rip me apart.
So I'm a noted Irv hater. So this is nothing personal. I apologise. So first of all, before we go into just Irv Smith, I just want to talk about young tight ends, I guess, that we hype up too much. So I did a little thread on Twitter. Some of you may have seen it. So some stats for you. If you take all tight ends over the last 6 seasons of DLF ADP, so that goes back to 2016, that are aged younger than 24 and ranked between tight end 8 and tight end 24, that gives you 36 tight ends. Of those 36, a year later, 50% of them had increased in value and 50% of them had decreased in value. So what we're saying is basically a coin flip whether that tight end is going to improve. Of those 36 tight ends, only 16.7% produced a top 12 season that year. So we're already talking that is a minuscule chance that Irv Smith's going to produce a top 12 tight end season this year. Okay.
Let's
then look at Irv Smith, the player. Okay. We talked about he's been injured. He's hardly, shown. So let's look at some efficiency stats. Okay. So in 2019, yards per route run, which I think is one of the most predictive stats in terms of tight end production. Okay. There were 40 tight ends that saw 30 targets or more that year. He was 36th in yards per route run at 1.02. He had 15% targets per route. He had a 10.7% target share, and he finished 39th in points per game. So 2019, despite the small sample size, even if you look at pure efficiency stats, he's not producing. He's not getting a decent look in terms of targets per route run. He's not getting a good overall target share, and he's not putting up a decent yards per route run. 2020, slightly better. Again, 30 targets. Of 43 tight ends that saw 30 targets, he was 23rd in yards per route run at 1.3. He had 16% targets per route, 12% target share, and he was 24th in PPR points per game. So for me, this is a guy that we're seeing go in that mid tight end 2 range that you're having to pay up to get in drafts, that hasn't produced in the small sample size, and yet we're projecting forward, and we've just shown that the chances of young tight ends that are going in this value of moving forward is pretty non-existent. So yeah, I can't get on board with Irv Smith. I can't get on board with the hype. I would much rather take a punt on, one of the rookies, whether that be Trey McBride, Jelani Woods. I would much rather, Albert O, Hunter Henry, those basically a whole list of tight ends. I think he's where have I got him? He's my tight end 25 currently, where I've got him ranked.
Oh, that is brutal. There's no way Albert O, Hunter Henry, these guys, there's no way I'm taking any of them above Irv Smith this year. I am the bandwagon leader for Irv Smith Jr. hype, but there's no way I'm taking any of them over Hunter. And I know you rattled off the stats and justified it, but at those points, he had different people competing. This year, he's got nobody in that locker room competing for touches. And
other than the overall Dynasty wide receiver 1.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah,
obviously it's been a top 24 wide receiver.
Then you got Thielen, who were out injured a lot of last year. He's aged it. He's going to be another year older. I'm going to go out there and say it. If Thielen gets injured again this year, Irv Smith will be the overall Vikings receiver 2. He will end up being the second main guy in that offense, and he will stratosphere through. He's fighting for a contract. He's going to want as many touches. He's got a better coach this year and a coach that likes to throw the ball. So everything there points to me saying, bang, 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 I want this guy. And I'm willing to roll the dice. It is ADP right now. If he doesn't do very well, I'll just let him go next year and he can hit free agency, and I'll draft in Brock Myers or somebody. Ideal.
So I wanted to chime in a little bit on this, and I'm not trying to pile on you, Luke, because you are the bandwagon leader. But yeah, I'm with Rich, unfortunately. Rich rattled off all the efficiency
Packers
stats
fan.
In the world. Yeah, Packers fans. Got to disagree with the Vikings fan on something, right? But when I'm looking at his pure game stats, he's never had a game over six receptions. He's only had one game with 6 receptions. Then he's had 2 with 5, and they all came in, or the 2 with 5 came with the rookie season. He's only ever had one game over 15 points. And then if we take that down even more, he's only ever, 2 games over 15 points. And then if we take that down to over 13 points, he's only had 3, which is 1 15-point game. So I am looking at him and seeing what I saw with Cam Akers on a much smaller scale as well. Like these stats are just such a small sample size for me to go away and draft him at his current ADP. Now, I will say I see an uptick for him. My concern around the small sample size is also exacerbated a little bit with the injury from last year, because we still have no idea how he's going to perform. We need to kind of see him a little bit before I can get behind him more. Tight end 18 for me is a little bit rich when Robert Tonyan is 2 spots later, and Robert Tonyan has actually...
Homer.
Yeah, definitely. But he's actually shown something. Robert Tonyan has actually shown something. Yes, it was an incredible... Yes, it was an incredible touchdown scoring season, but he has less target competition in the Packers offense, and he's actually shown something, whereas Smith hasn't. Both are coming off an injury, though. So I'll go to another person that is going even later in ADP, and that's Evan Engram. Now, yes, he's been injury riddled, but I've spoken about him before. So if you haven't listened to previous episodes, I think it was like the last week's or the week before, I've spoken about Evan Engram. So I'm not going to dive into too much, but even though he's injury riddled or has been, he's with a head coach that loves his tight end position. He has shown that he has got the talent and upside of a great tight end. He's been top 5, I believe it was, in his rookie season, and he hasn't got that much. He hasn't got that much target competition. Yes, they brought in Kirk and Zay Jones on monster contracts, but he hasn't got the overall Dynasty wide receiver 1 to compete with targets for, as well as a really good veteran. But you are more than welcome to jump back in, Luke, because I feel like we've just battered you a little bit for Irv Smith. I will say I like his upside, and he's the first tight end that I'm starting to target when I haven't got a starter tight end or a top tight end. He's the first one that I'm starting to get back into targeting, but it really needs that value to drop further than where he's currently going at ADP for me to actually look at him, which he has done in a few leagues.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like you said, obviously you mentioned Robert Tonyan. You got to remember he was going against Devante Adams for targets as well, but because he had nobody competing in that tight end room, he was going to be the guy, which is what Irv Smith has got in the situation he's in now this year. On top of that, obviously, for me, even when I'm drafting, I'm going that bold that I'm not. If I can't get Kelsey, Andrews, Waller, anybody like that, I'm happy to wait another 10 rounds and draft Irv Smith as my main guy. That's how confident I am on him doing well this year. Again, it's a lot of predicting the fact that I'm hoping that because he's the younger tight end that he's going to get the targets. I'm kind of wanting to see what Adam Thielen does this year because it's looking like it's probably going to be his last year and that kind of thing in Minnesota. Again, with his injury record last year and even the year before, he's probably another year older and probably going to get injured again, as much as I don't want to see it, which means it's going to open the door for Irv Smith, providing he stays fit, to be the second main guy. And like I say, obviously, Tonyan's done it, and he's done it with Devante Adams. Irv Smith can do it by all means with Justin Jefferson. I'm all in on that.
The one thing I'm going to say before we move on, because we don't have the time, and Rich wants it apparently, Tonyan did it with one of the best quarterbacks in the game, Aaron Rodgers, and didn't have a wide receiver 2, really. I mean, Alan Lazard and MVS may kind of come together to make somewhat Adam Thielen in terms of production-wise. But Tonyan, I think, had a bit more of an open room and has a better quarterback. Rich, I'm going to pass it over to you because we're going to need
super quick, and then you can go on to talk about your quarterback. But just a quick one. Irv Smith points per game with Adam Thielen in the lineup, 6.3. Irv Smith points per game with Adam Thielen not playing, 5.6. So he's produced
win-win.
He's produced worse when Thielen's not there, basically. So yeah,
it's not too far off, though. I'll give you that.
Okay, go on then,
anyway,
Liam. Finish.
We could be stuck on this for another hour, so I'm going to move on to my player, and we're going to get away from the tight end position because everyone knows that I don't like talking about tight ends when it comes to tight end premium. But I'm going to go with a quarterback, and I'm going to go with Tom Brady. Now, I understand that people are probably just eyebrows are raised and got confused why I'm going with Tom Brady, but his current ADP is quarterback 15. Now, for a guy, when we're talking about Dynasty, for a guy that has just signed a deal that when he retires, he is with, I believe it was Fox or ESPN, one of the two, to broadcast games for the next 10 years, and he's just signed it. To me, that kind of says that the end is extremely near. I mean, he did retire and come back, so that's going to drop his value, or I expected that to drop his value, but he's going as quarterback 15. To me, that's completely crazy for a guy that, yes, will give you one amazing season this season, but then he's going to drop out of your roster, in my opinion, by the end of next season, and you're going to be stuck with a late round pick next year in rookie drafts because he's carried your team. The flip side to that is 2023, as Rich said, could have 4 or 5 really good quarterbacks, and we could see kind of a similar style draft to not the 2021 but the 2020. No, am I going the wrong way? 2021 draft, Rich?
Yeah.
Correct me, please.
2021 was good. 5 quarterbacks.
That's the one.
Including future Hall of Fame Zach Wilson. 2022.
Well, we could see a similar situation to the 2021 draft play out with the 23 draft, but my concern comes around his age and the fact that he's, one, already been willing to retire, and 2, just signed a massive contract to call games for the next 10 years once he does retire. To me, you don't do that if you're not already planning to retire in the next 1 at push 2 seasons. Luke, Rich, whoever wants to dive in.
Go for it, Luke.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, Liam. You're drafting a guy that is literally just getting 1 year out of him. So naturally...
That's coming from the win now guy as well. That's surprising.
No, this is it. I'm going to say, normally, if he had 2-3 years in him, I'd be a bit more open, but I do not see him playing next year. And it's one of those, for a 1 year win now mode, is it really worth it? So all you're going to do is just lose your quarterback. You might well come first, second, third, which means next year you're going to have a ninth round pick in the first of a rookie. You're not going to get one of the top quarterbacks in next year's draft. So it's really, really not worth it. If anything, it's doing more damage than good. And naturally, his ADP is going to bust because he's not even going to be about next year. I just do not see a world where he plays next season. In the fact that, like you mentioned, because of the TV coverage contract he's got, he's not signed that to play quarterback alongside of it. It's just, and the money they're paying him is ridiculous as well. So he's just going to bail out on that.
Even if he does play in the next season, 2023 season, I still don't see his ADP being as high as it is. And we are talking about an older guy, depreciating asset, etc., etc. But it kind of does feel a bit like a low-hanging fruit to pick on Tom Brady in this exercise. But to me, QB 15 is something I wanted to talk about because it's just so high. Rich, dive in, please.
Can I just quickly, first of all, I just want to point out, this is actually 1 QB ADP. In Superflex, in Superflex ADP, it's going to QB 21. So I think that brings a little bit more picture into, I completely get it at QB 15 in a 12-team league, going and taking the punt. So, sorry, Liam, I've stitched you up there. Can I go out on a limb here and say I really think Brady plays next year? I think yes, that contract's there. I reckon that they've got a 2-year window here. I think that there's another season for him to play. I think that if you look at the contracts that a lot of them have signed this offseason, you look at the Godwin deal, you look at Leonard Fournette, it's like that 1+1 that you see a lot in the NBA where, you know, Leonard Fournette, as we were talking earlier, he's basically a 2-year contract. And I think that currently as it sits, Brady's cap hit next year is $35 million, and that's without him playing. So basically, do we think the Bucs are all in to try and win it this year, or do we think that they could re-sign another contract next year in the offseason and push that cap hit further down the line? And I think that they're going to have a 2-year run. If he wins another title this year, I think maybe it could be a disappear off into the sunset. But he's talked, from when he was in his 30s about wanting to play at age 45. And Alex Guerrero is, his health guru, whatever you want to call his job title now, was talking about the mechanics of the arm and how you can still produce at 45. I think everything about Tom Brady, I think he's going to want to break that 45 hurdle. I think he's going to want to play at 46, and I think he's still good enough to do it. And I think that unless he completely falls apart this year, I think he's come back for one more. So, yes, I think QB 15, if we're talking Superflex ADP, is mental. But I think if you look at the Superflex ADP, Liam, that I didn't share, so I apologise. I think quarterback 21. I mean, he's my QB 23, just to give some context. But in terms of redraft, he's my QB 7 this year. So yeah, I quite like it as a 1 or 2 year buy, because after all, I think age is the most overrated aspect of QB production.
I've got him as my wide receiver 25, so I'm still saying that he's not going to.
You've got him playing wide receiver now,
Liam. Quarterback 25. Rich, you've just got me stumbling because you didn't do the show sheet properly, and I'm not going to let you live this down because I don't want the listeners thinking that I messed up the ADP.
That's fine. I'm happy to hold my hands up in the bit. It was my cock up, Liam. So.
I'm only joking, but honestly, he's my quarterback 25, so I kind of get the point, but I still don't think he's playing more than 2 years. And to me, I'm not taking anyone that I don't see a foreseeable world that his value can increase in any way, shape, or form. Because if I see only a way that his value is going down, which I think it is for Brady, I can't get on board with taking him unless I have already committed fully to a redraft, a Luke style build where you go completely win now and you just need that quarterback 2 that's going to carry you.
Exactly that.
So, Luke, that is the end of the show. We've managed to get through the Irv Smith hate.
Just about.
But I hope you enjoyed it. We know that you have a Dynasty tip for us, mate. We are trying to sign the shows off with the Dynasty tip. So do you want to share that for the listeners?
I do, yeah. So going back to the beginning of the show, really, I'm going on a bit of a negative sort of vibe here in the fact that my tip is to build a win now team. The fact that most Dynasty leagues that I play in don't tend to last more than 2 or 3 years. I'm not going to be drafting somebody like Trevor Lawrence and hoping that he's going to do the job 3 or 4 years down the line. So that league could be gone and I've just wasted a potential option there. So yeah, so for me, I'm building a win now team pretty much like an aggressive redraft mode. I always look at players that are proven now over potentially what they may well be. So, for instance, I'm probably going to be taking somebody like Dalvin Cook or somebody like that over Breece Hall right now, whereas other people will be completely against that. But for me, Dalvin Cook's done it in the past. Breece Hall, we've still got to see whether he's going to do it. He will do. But I still want somebody who's going to prove it to me right now. And, yeah, I operate in 2-3 year windows when I start a new league.
I'm going to dive in there before Rich starts going off about Breece Hall and we have another Irv Smith incident about Breece Hall.
I said he'd do it
now. Thank you so much for coming on, Luke. It's been a pleasure having you. And
yeah, thank you.
Until next week, guys, when we have another guest, I believe, Rich, we have Joe Pepe coming on from the trick shot guy from Twitter, if you're on Twitter. I put Rich on the spot because I can see him.
I'm going to say I'm fronting. Yeah, we do. We've got Joe. Yeah.
So we've got Joe talking about some redraft style play. So basically, what Lucas has spoken about for a bit this episode. But until next week, guys, have a great week, and we'll see you then.